There was a time when just stepping off a plane at JFK or LAX felt like stepping into the center of the world. You could feel it before you even cleared the terminal. The German student arriving with 2 suitcases and a plan. The Japanese family loading up on shopping bags. The Canadian parents bringing their kids to Disney because that trip meant something bigger than a vacation. It felt like the world was still orienting itself around the United States. But what happens when that feeling starts to disappear? What happens when the international gates are technically open, but the energy is gone? When duty-free stores shut their lights off early, when the queue lines are still there, but the seats are empty, when major airports lose half, sometimes nearly 3/4 of the foreign passengers who used to pass through them. Because that is what has happened. And if even places like Las Vegas, Orlando, Honolulu, and San Francisco are feeling it, then this is no longer a story about one airport or one bad season. It is a much bigger question. Not just why fewer people are coming, but what changed in the experience, the perception, and the value proposition of coming here at all. In this video, I want to walk through the airports, the cities behind them, and the pattern connecting them, because once you see the pattern, the empty seats stop looking random. Las Vegas is a good place to start, because if any city should be immune to this, it is Vegas. Vegas was never sold as practical. It was sold as fantasy. It was the place where you landed and instantly felt permission to become a bigger version of yourself. Bigger hotel, bigger meal, bigger night, bigger story to tell when you got home. But that only works when the fantasy still feels worth entering. International arrivals into Las Vegas have fallen dramatically from where they used to be, and what makes that decline so striking is that Vegas was built for foreign demand. Luxury hotels, high-end retail, premium experiences, conventions, entertainment. A lot of that machine assumed a steady stream of international spenders. Now the rooms are there, the casinos are there, the lights are still on, but the equation has changed. The flight is more expensive. The visa process takes longer. The final bill is padded with resort fees, service fees, taxes, and surprise charges that make the whole trip feel less like escapism and more like a financial test. And once that happens, the city loses its natural advantage. Vegas used to be the obvious choice because it was unique. But when uniqueness starts competing against price, convenience, and lower friction alternatives in places like Tokyo, Dubai, Singapore, or even parts of Europe, then the magic weakens. The city still looks impressive, but the default pull is gone. It is no longer the dream people automatically choose. It is one option on a much longer list. And if a place built almost entirely on desire is struggling to hold international attention, then it makes sense to look at a city like Chicago, where the challenge is different. O'Hare was once one of those airports where the world seemed to pass through almost by default. Frankfurt, Seoul, Toronto, London, and so many others were woven into the rhythm of the place. But when international gates close and entire sections of the terminal begin to feel hollow, the silence says something numbers cannot. Chicago still has scale, architecture, history, food, sports, and a skyline that remains one of the most recognizable in America. But tourists do not just buy skylines. They buy the feeling of confidence around a destination. They buy the idea that this place will reward the emotional energy and money they spend to get there. And in recent years, the international perception of Chicago has become more mixed. Whether the headlines tell the full story is almost beside the point because tourism often responds to perception before it responds to nuance. If families in Europe or Asia keep seeing stories of unrest, instability, or urban tension, they start asking a much simpler question than economists do. They ask, will this feel comfortable? Will this feel easy? Will this feel worth the risk? Tourism can survive high prices for a while. It can survive long flights. It struggles much more when comfort and trust become uncertain. That is when even a world-class city begins to feel less automatic. Then there is Orlando, which might be the clearest example of how friction quietly kills demand. Orlando does not sell itself as a city in the conventional sense. It sells family memory. It sells childhood. It sells the feeling parents get when they watch their child see a place they have imagined for years. That is powerful. For decades, that was enough. But family travel is one of the most planned, sensitive, and comparison-heavy categories in tourism. Families budget harder, wait longer, and have more variables to manage. So when the visa process drags out, when airfare rises sharply, when hotel and park costs keep climbing, and when other countries make entry easier with faster approvals and cleaner logistics, then the emotional pull of Orlando starts colliding with the administrative burden of reaching it. And that collision matters. Because children do not care why a destination is difficult. They just know whether it is possible. A family comparing Florida against Japan, South Korea, parts of Europe, or even all-inclusive alternatives elsewhere is not just comparing attractions. They're comparing stress. They're comparing waiting time. They're comparing how much uncertainty is attached to the trip before the trip even starts. And when the easiest path increasingly leads somewhere else, even a place with enormous cultural familiarity can lose its place as the automatic family destination. Detroit tells a different story, but it points to the same broader problem. Detroit Metro is not just an airport for tourists. It is part of an ecosystem tied to business travel, manufacturing links, cross-border movement, and international connectivity that supports the identity of the city itself. Detroit has spent years trying to rebuild a global image after industrial decline. That rebuilding effort depends on more than local pride. It depends on connection. It depends on people being able to get in, get out, invest, visit, meet, inspect, expand, and return. When international volumes fall and routes shrink, the consequences are not limited to an airport board. Fewer arrivals ripple outward into fewer hotel nights, fewer restaurant receipts, fewer ground transport jobs, fewer business meetings, and fewer reasons for the city to remain visible in the international economic imagination. Airports are not passive infrastructure. They are signals. When a major industrial city loses direct global flow, it becomes slightly easier for the world to forget it. And that matters more than it seems. Detroit once sent cars out to the world. If the world now reaches it less often, that changes the city's momentum in ways that do not show up immediately, but build over time. New Orleans is even more revealing because New Orleans does not compete on efficiency. It competes on soul. The city has something rare, atmosphere that cannot be replicated by a newer airport, a cleaner boulevard, or a more polished tourism board somewhere else. The music, the food, the architecture, the history, the density of feeling in a place like that, those things still matter. But they matter within a budget. They matter within risk tolerance. They matter within a travel market that has become far more comparative than sentimental. If the trip becomes more expensive because of taxes, insurance, administrative hassle, or repeated uncertainty from weather-related concerns, then even authenticity has to fight harder. People may love New Orleans in theory and still choose not to go in practice. That is the trap. A city can remain deeply attractive and still become less chosen. And once a place that sells emotional experience has to start defending itself with practical justifications, it is already operating from a weaker position than before. Honolulu may be one of the strongest examples of how a destination can remain beautiful while becoming less viable. Hawaii did not lose the ocean. It did not lose the beaches.